I am so happy to be here again. I know they just told you, but my name is Matt Halpern. There it is over here, and that beautiful logo that my friend Jose created for me last year, which I just love. And we're going to talk about interactive writing, which is one of my favorite things to talk about. We're also going to probably be visited by my little guy, Kermit, who is a cat. He's sitting right at my feet right now, looking up at me, and I'm trying to ignore him. But here's the thing, and if you have cats, you know how this works. If I ignore him, which I'm going to do because I want to talk to you, he's not going to like that, and he's going to jump up here and hopefully not on my face, but you might see him. So if you see Kermit, it's good luck because he's a black cat, and black cats are good luck. All right, let me get started here. Again, I apologize a little bit here for all the buttons, but I just want to make sure that, oh, here we go. Okay, it's working. So just very quickly, a little bit about me. Again, my name is Matt Halpern. I have been an educator. This is my 19th year in education. Oh gosh, yeah, almost 20 years. Most of those years I taught kindergarten, but I have also taught first grade, I've taught second grade, and I was also a literacy coach. Last year, I left the classroom to pursue this thing that I've been doing for the last year on my own, which is running my own consulting business. And I work with schools and districts, mostly with early ed, but really I work with some schools up through 5th grade. So, and it's mostly on literacy, but I also do a lot of work on social emotional topics as well. And even though we're going to be talking about writing, which, when you hear the word writing, that sounds like literacy, right? We're talking about writing, Matt, which we are, but there's a lot of SEL components to what I'm going to be talking about, which is one of the reasons I'm so passionate about it. Is I feel like it kind of weaves together those two areas, which I love to talk about. Also, I'm going to apologize if you hear loud noises. I'm telling you about myself. I live in Portland, Maine, and I have the window open, and I should have shut it and turned on the air conditioning, and I didn't. I apologize. And so, like a motorcycle just went by, and you might hear a fire truck or something like that, because I live in the city. All right, let me make this a little bigger so you can see me. So there I am on the left teaching my little friends, and there's Kermit, who is my cat, who is again sitting at my feet staring at me, wondering why I am talking to the computer. And I live in Portland, Maine. I just told you that. And I always give a little pitch, just like a 5-second pitch. If you've never been to Maine, you have to come to Maine. It is one of the most beautiful places in the United States. I know I'm biased because I live here, but it's just gorgeous. The city where I live is on a peninsula. So it's not an island, but it's almost an island. So we're just surrounded by ocean, and there's paths and trails and food trucks. And it's just a really cool place to live and a really cool place to visit. Probably you want to come in the summer or the fall. Winter is pretty bad here. It's the Northeast, so we get a lot of snow. All right. Let's get started and talk about our topic that we're here to talk about, which is interactive writing. I'm looking at the clock because I always want to make sure. I have so much to say and I don't have a lot of time, so I have to talk quick. Why are we talking about interactive writing? Well, I want to show you, this is a chart from a classroom that I worked in a few months ago. I was working with the school. I was doing a visit, and when I went into this classroom, I'm going to make this a little bigger so you can see it. When I went into this classroom to work, this was a kindergarten classroom, and what they did for me was they split the class into, there were 2 teachers, so they split the class into 2, and I worked with half of the class and 1 teacher, and then I went to the other half of the class and the other teacher. And when I went to the second half, this is what they were doing. And so what they're doing here, and I'll tell you, and then I'll make it bigger again, just so because you're probably like, what is this, Matt? So this school in kindergarten, and a lot of kindergarten places do this, they do the whole, the wedding of Q and U. If you've never done that before, which I never did that in my classroom, you've probably heard of it. It's really cute, and they throw this big wedding and all this. Well, they were planning the wedding, and so they were making a list of all the things you would need for a wedding. And what you would probably notice if you look at this is that the teacher is doing all of the writing. at the beginning. So again, this is when I wasn't over there. I was working with the other group. And then when I came over, I sat, kind of near the teacher, and I was basically trying to prompt her to get to let kids come up. Now this was in the spring. I can't remember exactly when. I want to say it might have been March in kindergarten. So these kids, for the most part, they knew their letters, they knew their sounds. They were already they were in a place where they could do some of this work. And so I invited some kids. I just kind of interrupted her, in a respectful way, and said, let's have some kids come up here. And you can see where kids started to come up and do the writing, right? And how it changed. And also, in case you're wondering what some of these things are, this is a Jewish school, so the wedding is a Jewish wedding. So some of these things are things that you wouldn't have at a wedding unless it was a Jewish wedding. And the first item that a child wrote, which is about 3/4 of the way down on the left-hand side, he was writing the word rabbi, which again, for a Jewish wedding, you would need a rabbi. It's an R, a B, and an I. And the reason that I'm showing you this and why I start with this picture is because after that little boy went up and did that, and he needed some help, and I was there and I helped him, and we'll talk more about what that looks like in a little bit. He came back and he like melted into me. He was so excited. He pointed to the chart and he said, "That's my writing." He was so excited and engaged to see his own handwriting on the chart, because when we create charts in our classroom, we put those things up on pedestals, and so we're letting kids come into that and saying, hey, you can do this too. So that is the little elevator pitch of why I think interactive writing is so important. It truly invites kids into the writing process and it empowers them. And so what we're going to talk about over the next 45, 50 minutes that we have together, we're going to talk about these things. So this is kind of the outline of what I'm going to talk to you about. Authentic print, which I already just started to talk to you a little bit about, how this builds community, and then we're going to get into what are some skills and strategies that you can be teaching when you're using interactive writing. And then I'm going to give you lots of tips and strategies for doing it, right? What I don't have for you, I have lots of pictures that you're going to see, but I don't have video for you because we don't have a lot of time. But I will tell you, and I'll tell you again at the end, I love interactive writing so much that I actually wrote a book about it. Now, you may know that if you follow me on social media, because I talk about it all the time. The book has not come out yet. It will be out in the spring, but there will be lots of videos in the book. I don't know how many, but probably, I don't know. I don't want to say a number because I don't know how many, but there'll be a lot of videos because I recorded them specifically for this book. All right. So the first thing I want to just talk very quickly about is the difference between shared writing and interactive writing. And the only reason I want to talk about this, so I'm only going to talk about it very quickly, is I want to make sure you understand what interactive writing is. And basically, I'll show you this as I talk about it if you want to read it, but you don't have to because I'm going to tell you. Shared writing is when we create a text together, but the teacher, the adult, the grown-up, is doing all of the physical writing. The class, the students, the children are helping come up with what we're going to write, but they're not actually coming up and doing any writing. Interactive writing, they are coming up. Now, I do want to say, and I'll say this probably multiple times because I want to make sure people understand and hear me. And sometimes you have to say things more than once if you want people to hear you. Interactive writing does not mean kids are doing all of the writing. I'll say it one more time right now. Interactive writing does not mean the kids are doing all of the writing. If you are a person, and I don't know who all is here. I see a lot of people are here, but I don't know who you are or what grades you teach. If you're a person who teaches preschool or kindergarten, you are going to be doing a lot of the writing as well. And you'll see examples of that in a few minutes. So it's not this idea that kids do it all, because that's unrealistic, and it would take way too long, and it wouldn't be fun. And we don't want to do things that take too long and that aren't fun, because then we don't do them, right? So I want you to look at this as a way to invite kids in, but it doesn't mean that they are doing it all. And you'll see what I mean as I show you some of these pictures. So here's a picture right here that I'm going to show you. So this is from my classroom. This is creating the schedule with children at the beginning of the year. And what I want you to notice, the reason I'm showing you this, and it's not a finished schedule because I had not added the pictures yet. And I don't share a picture of the picture of the picture of the pictures. Oh my gosh, that's so meta. But basically, I don't want to put the pictures up because I don't necessarily have permissions to show all of those students. So if I don't have permissions to show everyone, I don't show up. But eventually there would be pictures. The reason I want you to see this is I did most of the writing, right? Like if you look at the first one that says morning meeting, I had a child come up whose name started with the letter M and write the M's. And I wrote the rest. And I know you're probably thinking, wow, Matt, you really don't have the best handwriting. And I don't. And that's okay because I was writing quickly. But also I want to model for kids that your handwriting needs to be legible and you need to be able to read it, but it doesn't have to look like a font. I know if you're a person who teaches primary, you probably have beautiful handwriting, but you don't have to. You can, it's okay if it doesn't look beautiful. It's a good message to send to kids. So that's the reason I'm showing you that. And also talking about this print is authentic. It's purposeful. It's something that we need in the classroom. We need a schedule, right? And so having the kids help me make that those first few days of school, guess what? They know what all those things are and they're really looking at the schedule and using the schedule. It's super meaningful to them because they help create it. Because the first day of school, the first moment when they walk in, there is no schedule. And so then, about 20 minutes after they arrive in kindergarten, they start saying things like, when do we go home? Or when do we eat, right? That's what they always want to know. When do they go home and when do we eat? If there was something in here that could tell us when those things are going to happen, oh, that's called the schedule, but we don't have one. We better make one. And so we make it together. Okay. I'm not going to read all this because it's a super long quote, but basically what it's talking about is that it's important for the things that we put up in our classrooms to be meaningful to kids, which is what I just said, but also for kids to have a hand in making them. Again, it doesn't mean that kids have to make everything. It doesn't mean that you can't put things up that everything has to be like that, but that we want to have some things in our classroom that when kids look around the room, they can see themselves. They can say, I did that, like that little boy on the first chart that I showed you. I am going to make it bigger because I do like to show these are my library bins. So the bins of books in the libraries are in the classroom library are made by students. And by having kids participate in that process, they know how the library works. They know where to put the books when they finish because they created them. Okay, let me keep going. Oh, this is a little story that I tell, and I do love to tell it, so I'm going to tell it. And it's about, again, why this authentic print is so meaningful. So remember how I told you I taught kindergarten, first and second grade? Well, I only taught first grade for 1 year. First grade is hard. If you're a first grade teacher, you know what I mean. And I loved it, and I loved the kids, but I went back to kindergarten after that 1 year. So the year that I taught first grade, I was actually a literacy coach, and the first grade teacher at this school that I was working at had to leave. She got very sick and she had to leave. And it was very sad. It was actually really sad. She ended up passing away, and I was very sad. But anyway, they asked me, would I take over this first grade classroom? And what are you going to say? No? I said, yes, of course I will. And when I came into the classroom, I'm going to make this bigger so you can see. If you look at the left, you can kind of see the pictures of the teacher had these schedule magnets. You can see the one that says lunch and outside, and every day she would put up the magnets of what was happening. Now, this was like the second day that I had taken over this classroom. And I told them, the first graders, I had an appointment the next day that I had made like months ago that I couldn't change. And I don't even remember what it was. I think it was a dental appointment, like I was getting a filling or something like not fun at the dentist. But anyway, I told the kids the day before at dismissal, I said, listen, tomorrow when you come in, I'm not going to be here. And I wanted them to know because they had had so many subs because she had been out sick for like I think like 2 months, they had had different people and subs, different subs every day. And so they finally had a teacher that was going to be with them until the end of the school year. It was like January when I took over. And so I wanted them to know so they didn't come in and feel alarmed. Well, they said, they didn't say anything. They just nodded. And then the next day I went to the dentist or wherever I went. And when I came in, this is what they had done. They had moved the schedule pieces. They were little magnets, and they had written my name. So that says Mr. Halpern. They had written my name where I had told them, I said, after math, when you come back, when it's time for lunch, I'll be here. And so they wrote my name in, and they did that all on their own. And I thought that was like a light bulb, aha, epiphany moment for me. I thought, oh, there's something here that I should tap into. And in this situation with these first graders, they had had a really rough year. And I was really looking for ways to bring them together as a community. And so when I saw that, I thought we should make the classroom belong to them a little bit more. And the first thing we did was we remade the schedule. So the reason I'm showing you this is, number one, it's a sweet story. It makes my heart feel warm and fuzzy when I think about it. And also I want to show you the schedule, but also we had a schedule that was a traditional store-bought, printed, teacher-made, whatever you have in your classroom. And then eventually we replaced it with one that the kids made. So that's another way to look at this is when you look around your classroom, you might pick something and say, I'm going to pick one thing. Maybe it's my schedule. Maybe it's my calendar. Oh my gosh, loud motorcycle, sorry. You're going to pick one thing and I'm going to work with kids to recreate that. It doesn't have to be everything in your classroom. Eventually, after doing this for years and years and years, I wanted my whole classroom to be created with kids, but I didn't start that way. This is how it started. And you can see, again, I'll make the picture a little bit bigger, that we created that on our own, right? Like the kids created that, they did all of the writing, and it was super meaningful to them. Hold on one second. I'm going to close my window because it's very loud. And so I'm just going to keep talking. You're going to think that I've disappeared, but I haven't. See, I'm back already. I just had to close it because it's so loud. I should have done that before and I didn't. I apologize. Okay, moving on. So what are we doing? What pieces are we making, right? I showed you a schedule and I showed you a calendar. Well, let me show you this. So basically, there are two categories of things that we could make with our kids. There's shared experiences. So those are things like when we take a field trip, or there's an assembly, or something happens outside. Like the example I have here is someone finds a bird's nest on the playground, or there's a bug in the classroom. Anything that's a shared experience, something that as a classroom we've shared that experience together, or a shared need. And so a shared need would be things like our schedule, our calendar, all the things basically that we put up on the walls, our routines, our procedures. If you have a word wall or a sound wall now, we have both, or labeling, colors, birthdays, all those things. I'm not saying that you have to do all those things with your students, but they're opportunities, right? These are places where we can invite kids to say, hey, this room is yours. It doesn't belong to me. It's our classroom. So let's make it together. And the way that I talk about interactive writing, or the way that I like to think about it, I made this up in my head, but I do think it's valid. Sometimes you have a thought and you're like, oh, that's a good thought. This was one of them. I feel like when a lot of times we talk about read aloud, right? And how important it is we gather on the carpet and we have this text that we're all looking at and we're sharing that experience and we're sharing the book and that warm, lovely feeling. And that's why we love read aloud. Well, this is the same type of thing, but it's writing. It's like the writing sibling to read aloud, because we're doing that. We're gathering, but instead of reading a text, we're writing a text. We're creating a text together. What else did I say that's brilliant on this? Oh, yeah. it gives kids a chance to take risks in a safe place. Writing is the hardest thing we ask kids to do. And you know this because writing is hard, like for adults, for me, for you. If someone said, can you sit down and write me a 20-page paper, you'd probably not be very happy, or you'd be a little nervous, right? Writing is really hard. And for us, it's just the thought process of what am I going to write? But we know how to sit down and make words, right? But for kids, they have to think, okay, what is the thing? What's the thought that I have? Okay, now I have a thought. Well, how do I put that on the paper? What letters and squiggles and lines do I make to show that? It's really, really hard. And what interactive writing does is it makes it accessible to all of the kids in your classroom. All right, hold on a minute. I'm going to try to move something here so I can. Here we go. I'm moving some of the buttons here. Okay. And I talked about this already, this idea that we want to send the message to kids that the classroom is theirs. It's not ours. And I love this book. If you don't know it, it's just a really fun book for the beginning of the school year called You're Finally Here. Now, I think it's out of print. It's one of those books that goes in and out of print. So it might be, if it's out of print, you could maybe find like a used version or a used copy, or ask your library or something, because it will be very expensive. But it's a really cute book that's basically like, I've been waiting for you. Now you're here. And I love reading this book on the first day of school, because it explains like kind of why the classroom's a little bit empty. There's not so much on the walls in my classroom because it's not my classroom, it's our classroom, and I've been waiting for you. And this book basically gives that message. Hold on. Okay. Yeah, the idea of community, right? We want our classroom to feel like a community, right? We want our kids to feel safe, and we want them to feel like it's a place that they can take risks. And one of my goals as an early childhood educator is I want to find opportunities to give kids a little bit of power. Now, what do I mean by that? What do you mean, Matt? You're giving kids power. What are you talking about? If you are a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old or a 6-year-old, however old, just think how old your students are. From the moment you wake up in the morning, you are told a lot what to do, where to do it, how to do it, when to do it. You don't have a lot of control over yourself. And we have to do that, right? Like that's just the way of the world. We can't let kids make all the decisions because they're children, and grown-ups have to work and make money to support those children. And I'm not saying that we should do that, but what I am saying is that I do believe that the classroom is a place where there are opportunities to give kids a little bit of power over their learning and their lives. And what I think interactive writing does is it helps children understand that when we write together, right? Because we're doing this as a class, we're not asking them to do it on their own. When we write together, there's this power in our voices coming together, like collectively, and that we can do things together as a group that on my own, I wouldn't be able to do. And that's a message. Forget about writing or reading or anything. That's a really good message for kids to start learning at the beginning of their schooling. You know, when they're 4 or 5 years old, like, wow, there's power in numbers, right? There's power in community. And I love this picture. So I'm going to tell you, this picture is from, remember I told you I shot all those videos for my book? Well, they also took pictures. And so these kids, I do have permission for all of them. So I was able to use some of their pictures in my presentation, which is lovely. And look how cute they are. They're like the cutest little kids. They were so much fun to work with. I got to spend 2 days with them, and we had a lot of fun. Anyway, moving on. So again, talking about community, this idea of a safety net, right? I already talked about the fact that writing is so hard, and with interactive writing, what we do is we provide the safety net to allow kids to participate in the writing process. We guide them through it. Sometimes we literally guide them, like they're holding the pen and you're holding their hand. I mean, it can be that literal, not always. But the goal is we want the scaffolds that we offer in interactive writing to transfer to their independent writing, because that's when the risk feels even greater, right? What kids start to learn is, okay, this is hard, but my teacher's right here, right? Like my teacher's right here. He or she's they're going to help me. Well, now when they go off and write on their own, guess what? I can't help 25 kids write their story every day. And I tell kids that. And so what happens is the work that we do together in interactive writing transfers over to their independent writing. And what I will tell you from years and years of doing this is the more interactive writing you do, the more independent writing you get from your kids. So it's worth doing. How's that for a sales pitch? Okay, so these are just some little questions. I'm not going to ask you to type them. They're more just like things to think about. But thinking about your classroom, and I know, again, there are people here probably from all over the country, and some of you probably are back in school, and some of you maybe are getting ready to go to school. But just think about your classroom and think about, do the things in your classroom build a sense of individual and group ownership, foster community? Do kids see their handwriting when they look around the classroom? That's the type of thing that I just want you to think about it. Now, I didn't know that we were using this fancy thing. I thought we were just going to be on Zoom with a chat box. So I don't know. Let's see how this goes here. I might be asking for trouble. What I wanted you to do was to think about one thing that you're thinking or feeling about what I've talked about so far, which is authentic print and building community in the classroom. If you want to type something in that question box, although I won't be able to see it, but I think people from ESGI will be able to see it. If you want to type something like, ooh, one thing I'm thinking about or feeling about this, you could type it in. If you don't, that's okay too, because there's a lot of people here. And if all 83 of you type something in, I don't think they could read it. But some of you could. So if you want to type something in, do it. I'm going to keep going. You type. And then if they interrupt me, I will stop and listen, because I do want to hear what people have to say.
So Matt, yes,
yeah.
We have your voice in the sky can tell you what some of the questions are here. How early do you begin this? I'm assuming you begin with just single sounds, first sounds, but beginning of your kinder is hard.
I am going to show you. You're going to see some of the things that I'm showing you are literally done on the first day of kindergarten. So again, that feels like really scary, right? Like, oh my gosh, are you crazy, Matt? No, I would do this on the first day of kindergarten, and here's why. Remember, they're not doing much, right? They're not doing much. So when we wrote morning meeting, Matt, I'm just trying to think of a name that starts with M, because I had a pretty good idea that I had seen that Matt knew how to write his name, so I knew that he knew how to write an M. So I invited him up to write the M, but that's it. He literally wrote the M, and I wrote the rest of the word. So it's short and it's quick. And as we learn more, right? Like as we learn more letters and sounds, and we start to learn sight words, and then later in the year we were learning things like digraphs and blends and all the things that you learn, then I'm having kids do more. So the scaffolding is really, really heavy at the beginning, and then I'm slowly starting to take it down very slowly. But I start this from day one because I want kids to understand that this is just like, would you read a book on the first day? I'm guessing you would, right? To me, it's the same thing. I want kids to understand that interactive writing is a thing that we do in our classroom, and there's a reason why we do it. And so we do it from the first day of school. Now, if that freaks you out, then you don't have to do it on the first day of school. But I would say that I wouldn't wait too long. You're getting, whoever asked that question, great, it's a great question, but I'm gonna talk about this a little bit later. People always say, well, how often do you do it? I do it every day, because the thing about interactive writing, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but that's okay. When we get to that slide, I'll just go super fast. You can do it all the time, right? It's not something that only happens during my literacy block. I use interactive writing during science, social studies, math. Basically, you'll see the examples you're going to see are throughout the instructional day. Was there anything else?
Of course, there's
burning.
so many positive responses. People
Oh,
are
good.
saying that they're very excited to get started. Of course, there are
Yes.
many questions about logistics, which we will definitely pass along to you at the very
Yes.
end. And but overall, I think people are feeling very motivated. I see motivated. I see woohoo, I'm doing this tomorrow. I'm thinking about where to add students' own writing. So very motivated at this point.
And I will tell you, obviously, I haven't seen all the questions, but they're going to give them to me. And what I'll probably do is maybe an email out to people. So I'll show you my website at the end. You'll want go to my website and join my mailing list. I know people hate being on a mailing list because I hate being on them too. But I will tell you that I don't send it that often. Like every couple of weeks, I send an email, and I don't really sell a whole lot. Like I'm not. I don't. I mean, nothing against people who sell things, but my emails are usually just like information or, oh, I'm going to be at a conference if you want to come, like that kind of thing. I'm not. It's not products. So, but I will email. But the other thing I'm going to tell you, based on even what you just said, um, Rochelle, is that some of the things that I think people are asking, I might answer because we still have a half an hour left. Let me keep going. Also, look how cute that little kid is. That's from the video, right? Anyway, I just want to show that because I hit the wrong button. Sometimes I do that. Okay, here we go. So another reason why, which I've kind of been talking about this already, is there's so much you can teach during interactive writing. This is a teacher who just gave a quote, and I thought it was a good one, so I put it in here. I mean, we're talking about concepts of print. We're working on handwriting. We're looking at sight words, sentence structure. It's all the things that you need kids to know. You can do it during interactive writing. Science of reading, which nobody can stop talking about science of reading, and I'm not going to talk about science of reading too much, but when you think about some of the parts of science of reading that people are talking about a lot, like phonemic awareness and phonics, you're doing all of that during interactive writing. So it's good work. And also those pictures, so those are the color words in my classroom. So instead of having some poster or whatever, which I used to have, so I had that poster that you buy online, or you go to the teacher store and you buy the posters. But then I was like, no, I want my kids to make them. It'll be more meaningful. And so they did. And these things all take time. That's the other thing. And I'm going to repeat that over and over. Some of the things I show you, and I'm going to try to name it when I see it, are things that take multiple sessions of interactive writing. It's not like we sat down in one 10-minute session and did it. Oh my gosh, someone's calling me now. Hold on. I thought I put my phone off, but apparently I didn't. Okay, I turned it off now. Sorry about that. I tell you. Oh boy. I talked about this already. The whole idea that when we have kids help create things, they internalize whatever it is, right? So if we want kids to know how to do something and we want to make a chart like of a procedure or routine, if we have them participate, they're going to internalize the meaning of that way more than if we just show them a chart that we made or we printed that's beautiful and perfect. Here's the other thing, and I know people don't like to hear this, and I'm so sorry, but I'm going to say it. It doesn't matter if it looks perfect and cute and beautiful. What matters is that it's meaningful to kids. I know people don't like that because people like the things to look beautiful and perfect. I know. I've been on Pinterest and I'm on Instagram, and I see people like, look at my chart that I made. And it's like the most beautiful thing in the world. And guess what? The kids don't care because it's just, they just don't. But if they made it, guess what? They care. So you have to let that go a little bit. And I know it's hard because when I presented, I was at a conference this summer talking about this in Atlanta, and there was a lady, and she was the nicest lady, and she just was like, it's so hard for me, Matt, because I want everything to be beautiful and perfect. And she couldn't let it go. So that's where I was like, so think of a baby step, right? I said that before. Is there one thing in your classroom you could say, it would be okay for me if our birthdays were made by the kids? The chart where you list all the months and everybody puts like on a cupcake or whatever, however you do it. Could the kids do that? Like one thing. And she was like, okay, I'll try. So I get it. Everyone's different. So I'm not I'm not trying to push you into something that that you're not comfortable with, but also I am trying to push you a little bit because I do think there's a lot of value in it. That's the example here in this picture, which I'm not going to talk too much about, is there's an SEL program at my school, and it's called Kelso's Wheel. That's neither here nor there. And instead of using the poster that came with the program, I got some coloring pages, and I had the kids write the words themselves so that they actually looked at the bulletin board and used it. Here's a little tip. So this is a chart that I make every year in the classroom. It's really, really important chart. It's from Michelle Garcia Winter's work on size of the problem. Now, when you look at this chart, you think, oh my gosh, like that looks like a lot. This chart took 3 days to make. And so I told my kids, this is going to take us 3 days to make. And the first day we did the size of the problem at the top. The second day we did the different problems, which are in the middle. And then on the third day, we did what can you try for each of those, which are the things at the bottom, and we put it together. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is there's 2 reasons. The one is, like I already said, I want you to understand that you're not going to do some of these things take time. And that's, so don't think, oh, I can't do this because my kids could never sit for the time it takes to do a chart like this. My kids didn't either. I don't know which way to point because everything's backwards over there. It took time. But the other thing is, think about the message that sends to kids, right? Sometimes when we sit down to write, we don't finish in one sitting. Sometimes we write a little bit and we stop. And then the next day we write a little more and then we stop. And as someone who wrote a book, a professional book, do you think I sat down in one day and wrote that whole book? Of course not. It took me like a year to write that book. And so that's something that I want kids to see. And this is a perfect opportunity to model that for them a lot, because a lot of the charts I'm going to show you were things that happened over days and sometimes over weeks. So let me keep going. Well, I talked about this already, just the idea that you can use it at any time of the day. So this chart here is an example from social studies. We had spent 3 weeks talking about Martin Luther King. And at the end of it, I said to the kids, let's make a chart and show all the things that we learned about Dr. King. What should we call the chart? Turn and tell your partner. We should call the chart, and they all did. And then I asked them, I was like, what did you come up with? Some kid raised their hand and they said, this is the chart about Martin Luther King Jr. And I thought that was a good name for the chart. I agree, because what is the chart for? It's for them. If that's what they want to call it for this, who cares? And so we wrote 5 things that we thought people should know about him and then put it up, and there was my bulletin board. Here's another tip, and I kind of talked about this already. If you are, and I think I'm not going to even say if, I'm guessing at this stage in the game, this applies to everyone. You probably have curricula that you work with, right? Like a reading curriculum, or writing, math, phonics, whatever it is. And it comes with lots of charts, right? Sometimes I see a chart and I show it to the kids and we think of some way that we could make it better. And that's a perfect opportunity to do some interactive writing. So this is an example. This chart here came with the writing curriculum that we used. And in the chart, I'll tell you what the differences are. So it's a very simple chart, right? The differences were the chart that came with the curriculum where it says who, there were only people. And you know, if you work with little kids, all they want to write about and draw are their pets. So we thought, let's put a pet in ours. And then the other change was on the where, in the middle, there was only a park. Well, we live in Maine and everybody goes to the beach. Like that's just what you do all the time, is you go to the beach. And so they wanted to add the beach. So we made the chart that came with the writing program better. So that's another, just a little tip of like, oh, what could I do? Oh, and it's also a way to study things like charts and think, because you can always make something better, right? Okay, the reason I'm showing you this is like a little science. We did a whole thing on armadillos because I read them a book about a fiction book that had an armadillo in it, and we live in Maine and nobody knew what an armadillo was. So I got books from the library, and then I told them sometimes when you're learning about something, you like to take notes. So as we learn about armadillos, we're going to learn so many facts and so much information we could never remember it all in our heads. We're going to write notes. And so over the course of a week, every time we read a book, we would write 1 or 2 things that we learned that was a new fact that we learned about armadillos. And so this chart over here that talks about the body, habitat, food, predators, and just random facts, because there were some random things that I didn't know where to put them. It took a week, right? We didn't do that in one sitting. That took a week to do. Okay, hold on. Keep going here. And this is just another little thing. What happens is, the more you do this, what starts to happen is, first what happens is you, as the teacher, start seeing opportunities in places that you didn't see before. So this was a math lesson where you probably maybe know this math lesson because it's in a lot of kindergarten math curriculums, where we make a graph of our favorite colors or our favorite fruits or whatever it is. And instead of me doing all the writing, it took like a few extra minutes to have some kids come up and do the writing. But what also happens is kids start seeing opportunities for them to come up and do some of the writing. And that's amazing, because that's what I want, right? I want them to be wanting to write all the time, not just during writing time. Okay. So in my book, I know, I feel like I'm selling you my book, which isn't even out yet, but it's going to be a pretty book. In my book, I have this big graph and chart about risks that we have when we're writing, and then how interactive writing can help with that. Well, I couldn't put the whole thing in here because, look, we only have 15 minutes left. But here's an example. So one of the big things that's a risk when you're a new writer is you don't know what letters and sounds make up a word, right? If you know the word that you want to write is, I don't know, I can't think of a word right now, cat. Well, what letters make up? Okay, I don't know. Or maybe I know the sound is, that's the first sound in that word, but which letter makes that sound? Like that's the work that kids have to do that's tricky for them. And so when we work together, part of what I'm doing is I'm giving them all this mindset work around, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. What do I do? Do I just like put my head down? Do I have a fit about it? No. What can I do? I can say the word. I have tools. What tools could I use if I know a sound but I don't know the letter that goes with that sound? I could look at the alphabet chart, and I'm doing all that with them. So they're hearing that thinking over and over, because I'm doing this all the time, right? I'm doing it all the time, not just, randomly every once a week or something. I'm trying to make sure that I do it at least once a day, because every time that I do that, they hear, oh, I can look at the alphabet chart. Oh, I can look at the alphabet chart. And for some kids, they need to hear that, 30 times. And then the 31st time when they're sitting on their own and they make the sound and they don't know the letter, suddenly the light bulb goes off. Oh, I could look at the alphabet chart, because you've said it 30 times and they just needed to hear it that many times. Not every kid, but some kids need to hear it more than that, right? So, okay, let me keep going. And I just talked about this. So this is just this whole mindset of, what do I do if I have a problem when I'm writing? Like what self-talk can I tell myself to persevere? And so these are just some examples, right? Like, okay, this is really hard, but I can do it. Or maybe I say a word and we say, oh, I'm not sure how to spell this word. What could I do? Let me say it again, and I'll say it slower so I can try to hear the sounds. Or what do I do when I make a mistake? Well, I fix it and I move on, right? So I'm saying that out loud, just like you would do with a read aloud, right? I want to model the thinking that kids do when they're reading. I want to model the thinking that writers do when they're writing. And guess what? Writers make mistakes. And I'll give you another hint that's not in here, but I tell people, and I'm not telling you what to do, but this is what I found in my classroom. I don't let kids use an eraser. We don't erase, because erasing stops writing. And if you're a kindergarten teacher or maybe a first grade teacher, you know what I mean, because this is what happens. They write something and then they spend the entire time erasing, and sometimes they make a hole on the paper and they're not writing, right? And so what I'm showing them during interactive writing is that when I make a mistake, I put one line through it and I just keep moving. That's it. And the way that I enforce this is that we don't have erasers. So either I buy pencils that don't have erasers, or my neighbor who has a wood shop thing in his garage or whatever, I bring the pencils home and he saws them off. He saws the erasers off. Like, I mean it. You can't erase because it's not possible. The other thing, and I don't always do this at the beginning of the year, it takes a few months for us to work up to it, is then you get a special tool that authors use, and it's called a pen. And they don't have erasers either. But they don't care about that because by that time they haven't erased anyway. And there's actually research that shows kids write more if they use a pen because there's less friction. So there's that too. Anyway, I know people are like, you saw the erasers off? I saw them off and throw them away. I hate erasers. The other thing about interactive writing that I love, which you probably have guessed from what I'm saying, is that it's differentiated by nature, right? When kids come up, I'm able to give them whatever teaching they need. And the videos, which you'll see later if you get my book later, show this, right? Some kids come up and they have a lot of skills and they have a lot of information that they're able to use. And so then I can work with that. And some kids have nothing. And I can work with that too. And this poster I want to show you is, I don't know if it's the first day of kindergarten, but it's definitely the first week of kindergarten. And it's just a shape poster. We're just putting the names on the shapes. And I drew all those shapes, and you can see that kids mostly just wrote the first letter. Couple of words, they wrote maybe the first two letters, but that's it. I did the rest of the writing. So it was quick. I had already drawn the shapes. So all I had to do was have kids come up and write one or two letters, and I wrote the rest of the letter. So it needs to be quick because they can't sit for that long, right? Okay. And so this is also something that I've created for my book, which there's more of it in the book, but I wanted to show you what a little bit of what it is. This idea that there are levels of scaffolding, right? So this is the example that I showed before, when a child comes up and they don't know what letter to write. When they make a sound, they're not sure what letter goes with it. So there's a high level of scaffolding where the teacher can make the sound, and then we can look at the alphabet chart together, and I can help you identify it. And then I can remove some of that, right? So where maybe I ask the child to replicate the sound, like I make the sound myself and I say, now you make the sound. And now look at the alphabet chart. Can you find it? Or one thing I love to do is like give a hint, it's like it's in this row of letters or something like that. All the way to the lowest level of scaffolding, which is the child can do it pretty much independently. So they don't really need any scaffolding. Okay, hold on. We've gotten to the point now where I only have 8 minutes left, but I have way more than 8 minutes of information. So I'm going to have to be picky about what I share with you and share with you. And that's just because I could talk about this forever, because I literally wrote a book about it. So I have a lot of information. So it's hard for me to just talk about it in a little bit of time. Okay, so I'm going to just tell you this, which I kind of already talked about, but I want to reiterate it. It has to be frequent, right? This isn't something that we can do sporadically and think that it's going to have an impact, right? If I only read aloud to my kids once a week, that's not going to do much, right? There's a reason we read aloud to our kids, not just sometimes once a day, but multiple times a day. Same thing. I have to be flexible. So sometimes I think a kid's going to come up and know something or be able to do something, and they're not. I like to have options for kids. So if kids need help, there are things that I can offer them. I can write the letter with a highlighter or a yellow marker, and they can trace it. We can do hand over hand. I can write the letter on a whiteboard and they can copy it. There's options, because some kids don't want you touching them, right? Like, oh, I offer hand over hand and they're like, no, I don't want you touching my hand. And so that's okay. Okay, so this is basically the flow of an interactive writing session. And they're all going to be a little different because I just told you have to be flexible, right? But generally speaking, most sessions have these components. You start at the top, which is setting the purpose. And I'm going to just talk you through these because, again, we don't have a lot of time. So setting the purpose is like, why are we doing this? Why are we writing this? There's a reason, right? We're writing this because we need a schedule, or we're writing this so we can remember facts about armadillos, or whatever the reason is. Who are we writing it for? Now, audience, that plays into one of the things that people always ask me about, which is spelling. Does everything have to be spelled correctly, or how do you feel about not having everything spelled correctly? So I firmly believe that unless it's something that is for maybe parents, it does not need to be spelled correctly. And the reason is I want to honor I want to honor where kids are, right? And if the message I'm sending to kids from the beginning, when they don't even know all their letters and sounds, is that every word has to be spelled correctly or it's wrong, how much writing do you think kids are actually going to do? Not much. So I could talk about that for an hour, honestly, because I go to places and they're like, my principal says we can't put anything up unless everything's spelled correctly. And I'm like, what? What kind of message are you sending kids? Like everything has to be perfect? Now, if you're a second grade teacher or a third grade teacher, that's different. But if I'm a preschool or kindergarten teacher, or I would argue even first grade, I'm holding kids responsible for what I've taught them, right? And I'm not going to just tell them how to spell every word all the time. Anyway, let me go back to this and I'll talk about that very briefly. So then we're going to actually write it, which is compose and construct the text, and then we reread it. So there's some reading, and then the last two things are kind of optional, which is I like to summarize what we did, maybe remind them of some teaching, like, wow, we really were thinking about how we can leave spaces in between our words. And here were some ways that we thought we could remember to do it, just to remind them. And then extend the learning is just like, there's all these things you can do, but they're, like fancy optional fun things that you don't have to do. Okay, what am I going to show you now? Because I have so much more to show you and I have 4 minutes. So let me see. One thing I'm going to tell you is I do like this little tip. So you can ask students inquiry-based questions, and I'm giving you some examples here. So if you're trying to get them to think of what to write about, like what have we been learning about, or how can we show our learning, or what were the important parts? Is there a better way? So if I have something and I want to do it in a different way, I am going to show this because, oh boy, here are 5 reasons why I don't spell for kids. Like I really, really don't like to tell kids how to spell words. Very rarely. On occasion I will, again, if it's like something that's going home or something like that. I want kids to build their own confidence. I want them to feel like they can take risks. And if they think everything has to be spelled correctly, they won't. What's going to happen when they're sitting on their own? Remember, I have 25 kids. I can't sit with every kid and spell every word. They're not going to write. Also, research. I want to see the mistakes kids make in spelling so it helps me know what to teach them, right? Oh boy, nobody knows the TH digraph because nobody knows how to spell that. I need to teach that. And then also language usage. I want kids to try writing words like marshmallow and roller coaster or hippopotamus, and they're not going to do that if they're worried that they don't know how to spell it correctly, right? And these are just some little tips. So when kids ask you, did I spell it right? And they didn't, and you don't know what to say, here are some things you can say, like, oh, I see the sounds, or do you see all the sounds that you hear? Or my favorite one is the third one. That looks good to me. I didn't say it was right. Okay, so I'm annoyed at myself because I have more to share and I don't have a lot more time. But let me share this with you. So what are all the other kids doing? So when I invite one student up, what is everyone else doing, right? Because that's the worry I think a lot of people have, like, well, how do I manage the rest of the class? So the kids know that they have a job to do. They have to be writing as well. And writing means writing on the carpet with your finger. You can, if you feel comfortable with this and your class can handle it, they can write on the back of the person in front of them. usually in kindergarten, we start with this one, which is writing in the air. I call it skywriting, right? They can write on their hands, like here's my paper, here's my pen, and they're writing on their hand. You can actually give them whiteboards or clipboards and have them literally do the writing. But they understand from day one, because I tell them this and I teach them this, that my expectation is that they are writing as well, even if I don't invite them up. And if I look and I see that you're not doing that, you're not writing the letters in the air or like this or on the carpet, and I only give them a couple of options to begin with, right? I don't teach them all these things. That would be too much. Like pick one or two. Then I might not invite you up. And let me tell you, they want to come up. Okay. Well, I am going to just skip to the end because we're out of time, which is when you finish doing this work with your kids, be gentle with yourself, right? And think, what went well, and maybe what could I do different next time, right? This is good teaching practice no matter what you're doing. And just remember to be flexible, be brave, be open. And here's what I'm going to tell you. There's my website. I have more information about interactive writing on my website. There's a blog section, and I have a few blog posts, I think actually quite a few about this. You can also subscribe to my email.